And as I've said already, my name is Derek Mitchell. I'm the CEO of iPosy, and today's webinar is all about our patient education program, the fourth edition of which is launched for expressions of interest from iPosy patient communities, but also individual patients and patient advocates around the country and on the island of Ireland. So we are so proud of this program, I have to say. We started off in 2017 with a pilot program that we weren't quite certain where it was headed, but we knew we had to do it in Ireland because we knew there was an appetite for this kind of education program that maybe didn't fit with the more structured or traditional education programs that were available through higher education institutions or further education programs or QQI and other formalized programs. So iPosy has been doing this for a number of years, and we've had three successful iterations of the program, and we've learned a lot from the different iterations. Our latest one was in the middle of the pandemic, and that was certainly an interesting one. And we were able to successfully achieve our objectives for it. And I do recall the graduation ceremony being the first time that actually that cohort were able to come together face to face. And there was an outpouring of giddiness, I think, in the room, which was a great thing to see. But at the same time, there's a seriousness to it, because what the program delivers is very much education and knowledge and content and and all of that good stuff. But I think the value for the graduates, certainly from the feedback that we've received, and indeed you're probably going to hear from Surika, and I think Mark has joined us as well. So around the other things that are associated with the program, the things that people actually take forward in their own lives and in their own work and in their own fields. So that's really about confidence and connections and networks and really, I think, and a more firm understanding as to the role that patients and their communities can play in this rather kind of complex area of research and development and innovation. So, I won't give too much of a background on the program, but suffice to say, it's something that came from our involvement with the European Patients Academy on Therapeutic Innovation, EUPATI. And we were one of the founding members of EUPATI, and we could see that at the European level, where they've been running an expert patient course, and of which there's been many, I think it's 12 Irish people have gone through that course to date, and many more, including our very own Caroline Whelan, are currently on the current iteration. And I think the impact of that course and the impact that the graduates are making, we saw that happening at the European level, and we wanted to replicate it in Ireland. And in the time that we've been running this program, we have seen a lot of change in the patient involvement area or arena in Ireland. There's more supports, there's more opportunities, there's more networks, and many of our graduates have availed of these opportunities. So it's a very exciting time for us in iPosy, and also for I think the past graduates as well, because it's almost like kind of paying it forward in terms of the value that you get from completing the program. Part of it is actually giving back to others, that increased sense of awareness of where things are currently at, but also where we want to get to, because an awful lot of patient involvement is about bringing patients to the table and ensuring that their voices are heard. But when we think about what success might look like from a patient involvement perspective, that's often kind of quite hard to precisely identify what what does a more person or patient centered healthcare system look like? And that's something that IPOSI is working on in terms of our own work. And we're involving our graduates in that side of things as well through our UPATI national platform. So we'll probably talk about that a little bit later on. But without further ado, just to say that as well, if people do have questions, please feel free to raise your hand, either virtually or physically. We'll try and get to you. And also, please use the chat function that's there. Caroline will be monitoring that and feeding back to us. So we'll invite you for questions at any stage of the process, really. So if you have that burning question that maybe you don't have all that much time to ask it, please feel free to interrupt at any stage. So I might ask Caroline just to put it as well, a link to the IPOSI website into the chat, just so that people have that link to the information that's already there. And I will then turn to our two former graduates of the program, and that's Sarika and Mark. So Sarika, if you wouldn't mind going first about maybe what you took from the program, both in terms of learning, but also your experiences during the program, but also subsequent to the program, and what value it has had for you.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'll just really quickly, my disease background is multiple sclerosis. I'm also a qualified healthcare professional. I'm a qualified midwife, but I did the course in 2019, so pre-pandemic, and I think my big takeaway from it was that, like, I think you've already said it, Derek, talk about connections with people and that kind of thing. And I feel like, you know, as a midwife, I would have done modules in college about advocacy and all that stuff, but it's very different being a patient advocate. It's completely different. And I know that so everybody kind of will approach the IPOSI course and to get different things out of it. I think I wanted to understand how to advocate for myself, how to advocate for other people. But like I was saying as well, and I say it all the time, I'm a big proponent in the idea of having patients embedded in undergraduate training of healthcare professionals, so doctors, nurses, midwives, etc. So what I took from it then, I learned so much about clinical trials that I didn't know. I did a clinical trials module in college, which is great surface compared to this. This was very in-depth, but it was very good to know about drug discovery and how drugs make it from early stage trials to actually being a finished product. I think, you know, obviously with the pandemic and the rapid development of vaccinations, like, that's really interesting to see how were they able to expedite those things so quickly and that kind of thing. And so I, as a neurological patient, then I have done a number of educational sessions, like I said, with doctors, nurses, and midwives, but I'm also I'm a PPI contributor on the Future Neuro panel out of RCSI, which is the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland, and they would have doctors, healthcare professionals, and other people living with various neurological conditions, and it's all about kind of coming up with models to improve care pathways for people with neurological conditions. But I'd say the thing that I took the most from it, above all else, is confidence in myself, you know, to be able to say, actually, you know, I know what I'm talking about, and because I have that lived experience, it's invaluable. You know, it's invaluable to be that patient, having that lived experience, instead of talking about something in the abstract, that I can actually say, you know, my big bugbear at the moment is stem cell transplantation for multiple sclerosis patients, because I had to go last year to London to have it done, because it's done in Ireland, but not for MS patients. So that's my new little hobby horse, you know, but because I've done this course, it has made me very, what's the word I'm looking for? I feel very able to kind of put my toe in the water and go, actually, why is that not available here? And what's actually stopping it? Because I had to go to the UK. It would have been easier to get it done here, you know. So yeah, so I think, and also because I'm a healthcare professional, I would have had a little bit of insight into how the healthcare system works. But actually doing this course has really opened my eyes, actually, you know, a lot more than being somebody working on the front line. It's completely different. But that's me, I'm waffling, so I'll stop talking now because I have a habit of waffling.
Well, if thanks, Sarika, and would I be right in saying that maybe in terms of the who on the program, both in terms of maybe your fellow classmates and also the people, our education partners who deliver a lot of the course, In terms of that networking, was that something that you took from it? And
Absolutely, yeah. So like I said, being involved with Future Neuro I would never have even known about that. Wouldn't have known about it. But also, you know, Caroline often will send out kind of expressions of interest for patient engagement in different things. And sometimes they don't apply to my disease area and they're not really something that I can get into. But a lot of the times they are. And I will always, Caroline probably knows, I will probably express interest in nearly every single thing that I feel is relevant to my background. But I think, and I'm involved with the Irish ENP and I've just been nominated chair for that. So we just had a meeting just now and they're talking about everything that they're going to be doing this year. And there's a lot of exciting stuff happening there as well. So kind of, I would never have had the confidence to get involved with that at all before I'd done this course. So definitely involved in that regard.
great. And certainly speaking personally, anytime I do a course, or particularly the one that's predominantly e-learning, I often find that it's the friendships that I take forward that leave the most lasting impression. Have you made any kind of friendships from the previous cohort?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, I'm in contact with Siobhan Freeney a lot of it. She's absolutely brilliant. She's fantastic. But no, and like just dipping in and out, talking to different people, and then, you know, you would kind of get talking to them, and then sometimes you might, like, for example, Robert, like Joyce, he did the EUPATI training, but he's also on the Future Neuro panel, and he has MS, and his story is completely different to mine. That kind of way. But it's always good to be able to link in with other people, and not just in the MS area, because if that was the case, it would be a very small little bubble. But it's always very interesting to kind of have the point of view of people who are living with cancers, who are living with, you know, diabetes, whatever it is, because I know we had Laura and she was type 1 diabetic and she was really good as well. But, that was 2019. I'm still in touch with a lot of them. Yeah.
Yeah, you make a great point about. I think at the time, if everybody can actually think about back to 2020 or 2021, when in the middle of the pandemic, we were running a course on understanding clinical trials, and the entire world was understanding about clinical trials, particularly for vaccines, and trying to figure out which one was going to be the most effective. And it was certainly a really interesting time for us in terms of the attention that was being focused on the program. But it'll be interesting just to see how much of that now is relevant in people's lives and how we can actually learn from that. Because certainly at the time, everybody was an expert on clinical trials.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. 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 People have done their own research, but I would always say rely on what the trials are telling you. Don't be relying on, well, Joe down the road told me that. But it kind of solidified the whole COVID, and then it solidified the importance of the robust scientific academic studies as opposed to Joe Soap on the road. I would be very much like, people say to me, oh, well, I wouldn't get a vaccine. And you're like, well, that's your choice, but I got one yesterday. I'll keep getting them until I have to just get them, and that's it, because the science is there. And I'm very confident in the science because of the course I did. The kind of way? It's because of learning about the clinical trials and how they work. I'm very, very confident about them. So
great. Thanks, Sorcha. Before I bring in Mark, I might just ask if anybody has any questions for Sorcha. Anybody any burning questions? Please feel free to either unmute yourself or raise your hand. I think your point as well, Sorcha, was well made about for many patient advocates. It's very much that your focus is very much on your disease area, and you typically meet other advocates under the same kind of condition. And part of the value of the IPOSI program is that there's that cross connectivity and cross almost pollination of different conditions, and that brings huge insights, I think, and huge commonalities to be identified between people.
There's huge learning in it, isn't there? There's huge learning to actually find out what the patient experience is of other things, because you do become a little bit, well, I have MS, so that's what I'm talking. Being an advocate, you don't have to only advocate for MS patients. You can advocate for any number of patients if you have the knowledge and the confidence to do it. And I feel like the APOSI course gives you that.
Thanks, Erica. I'll bring in Mark at this stage. So, Mark, Serica was kind of talking there about what she learned of the program, but it might be interesting to kind of give us an insight from your own kind of background as to maybe what motivated you to actually sign up in the first place.
Yeah, I suppose just similar as Serica said, just to give my background, I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer in April 2020 at the height of the pandemic. And I suppose you're sitting at home spending a lot of time other than when you're in and out of hospitals. And it was a very insular kind of experience. And then obviously, I suppose you go down the rabbit hole of a lot of reading and a lot of investigating, and people are mentioning this type of therapy or that type of therapy. So your own, I suppose, your own journey, coincides, as I said, with regard to clinical trials, vaccines, should you take them, should you not, could you take them, depending on kind of what you're on. So it made it a very, I suppose, a very personal thing for me. And then it was, I suppose, somebody suggested the course, and I was trying to, I suppose, find my, what role I was going to have further in life for myself. What was I going to kind of give my time to outside of my family? And I'm not from a medical background at all. I'm a supermarket manager by trade, so I don't have any, medical background or that would have kind of driven me into that kind of sphere. But I suppose I had seen a lot of people have, I suppose, interactions in hospitals and their treatment and everything much the same as myself. And I suppose it was the wanting to maybe help people that you felt couldn't advocate for themselves. It's fine for me, I said, as I would say, other than having, stage 4 cancer, I'm, young, fit and able. So and I'm well able to speak for myself and ask the questions. But just, I felt very often that there were maybe people that weren't in a position that could do that. And was there anything that I suppose I could do to kind of help that? And I suppose it was a bit daunting to kind of, do the application form and, saying, oh, I think for someone who hadn't, kind of done anything academically in a while or things like that, it can be very daunting. And I think trepidation, kind of hold us back a lot. But, getting into it and, the information that it gave and it gives you a platform. I've been involved in various things through, I suppose it's off the back of doing the IPOSI patient education program. And while I do have involvement with, cancer-centric things, I've done the Dragon's Den with IPOSI, and I've done, a few other things with UCD and bits and pieces here and there. And it's off the back of that. So Serica said, it really does give you a grounding across the, I suppose, the whole kind of patient involvement framework in Ireland. So, you don't have to be pigeonholed just by virtue of, Serica saying, the MS stuff, appealed to her, or me saying, oh, look, if Caroline sends out an email and it's, cancer-centric something, then obviously I'll put my hand up. I look at things on a very kind of objective level and think, if I feel that I have anything to contribute, be it through anything that I've learned or that we've been taught or any informed decision that I can make myself, I don't let the I suppose what it is hold me back. And I would say to anyone that's might be nervous about taking on the workload, it is very manageable the way that it manages out. And I suppose I came to it during we were the Zoom generation for the IPOSI course. It was 2021. Everything was over Zoom, and the graduation was delayed, and that was the first time that anyone got to meet in person. But I do think as well, it's the relationships that you make and the people that you get to know is probably the most, to me, it's the connections that you make is the most valuable thing. We had great mentors on our course in Nuala and Mandy, and they really did make the course a lot more accessible. And the WhatsApp group was a great tool during it, and something that's kept going well beyond the patient education program having ended. So you are making those kind of friendships that are much longer lasting. But I do think that the involvement now, and it maybe being based around more the kind of the UPATI design and doing the patient education course, I just think that people maybe take you a bit more seriously, that it's not just, as Serica would say, it's not just, John down the road has an opinion on something and say, well, look, I've completed the patient education course, or, I'm a UPATI fellow, or I'm a member of the ENP. And I think they just kind of hear that, and it's, it kind of, that their ears prick up a little bit, and they kind of go, oh, right. I was recently appointed to the cancer and patient committee with the Department of Health. Now we haven't had our first meeting this year yet, so it was off the back of doing the IPOSI patient education program that I had the confidence to put myself forward for that. And I wouldn't be doing that if it wasn't that. And look, I'm sure there's probably people that are going to do the course, and they may be patients themselves, or they may be carers for patients or family members, and everyone has constraints and responsibilities and everything outside of it. But I was going through a lot of treatment at the time when I started on my journey, and I thought it was a pretty welcome distraction. I thought it was a very well structured course. Any help that you needed was readily available. So Caroline was great support during the course, as she always is in everything that we do. And as mentioned, Mandy and Nuala, and then even I suppose people that were doing the courses, throwing each other text messages, how did you find this module, that kind of module? And I said, having not come at all from a medical background, I don't know. I wouldn't say it's a hindrance, certainly, because obviously if you've got any kind of background in it, it probably does help from the research side of things, and particularly the clinical trial kind of modules. But I suppose having people that had done the course previously to kind of imbue their knowledge was a great asset to have, and it just made the journey through. I enjoyed doing the course. I found it very enjoyable, and I would hope that we get another good cohort of people to take up the mantle this time around, and get our next generation of patient advocates out of it.
Thanks, Mark, and congratulations on the Cancer Advisory Committee opportunity. So that's fantastic to hear. It never ceases to kind of surprise me in terms of the level at which graduates of the program end up operating at. I mean, we have people on the likes of the HSE board, we have people on national committees, research ethics committees, things like that, that I don't think, and certainly from what you've been saying, I don't think you ever would have pictured yourself on such a committee at any stage prior to this. So, and I think there's a question in there from Gavin about, people from a non-medical background or not having had maybe any exposure to medical terms or terminology or things like that. Was there any part of the course that you found the toughest in terms of, so we have 3 modules, one is about clinical trials, the other is about the regulation of medicines and devices, and then the other one is about how the state assesses new technologies. Was there a particular element that maybe was tougher than the others, or?
Yeah, I suppose. Look, there's some of the regulatory and the kind of reading the research papers and things like that. That there was a bit in that, but I think it's how you approach it. If you look at it and think, oh my God, that's so daunting. You're gonna set yourself back. I mean, everyone is different and how they approach what they do, but there's little quizzes at the end of kind of each thing, and I kind of got to the stage where I used to do the quiz before I even had done the module, just to see kind of what level of knowledge did I have before I was taught anything, and before I'd read anything. But I think more so than the I suppose the content, it was how it was presented. We might have spoken in the kind of group chats and things like that in previous meetings that we had, where UCD and Peter Doran and certain were so engaging and certain people to listen to. But when it gets into the kind of the kind of wordier aspects, or the that you're kind of trudging through, you do need someone to kind of I suppose keep your engagement, or kind of keep your focus. But I remember Jen saying in our group that they were nearly treating the course like it was a podcast, and they were there were people going out and throwing on their module as they were going out for a walk, or walk with the dog, or whatever they were doing, and then kind of coming back in. And I think the big worry for us when we were all starting, remember one of the first meetings we had and with Mandy was, is there a big test at the end? Because I think that's what everybody kind of it's what metric is it going to be measured by? But look, it's like anything, and and even the way school has changed for our kids and things, it's more a continuous assessment, kind of keep you ticking along. But I felt that the course was very accessible. I know I think I did mention 1 or 2 people that could have been a bit had a bit more pep in their step when they were when you're listening to 8 minutes of their kind of content, and because if you don't engage with it or they're not engaging with you, you'll either miss something, or you have to, and kind of go back on it. But yeah, I suppose, as I said, it's like anything, if you haven't done kind of research papers and things like that. And I know that we were mentioning in the last ENP meeting that we're the presentation skills and the how to do research, all those sort of things. So I do think it's going to be very much a combined meeting of the minds that kind of gets us to where we want to be with how the course gets presented. But I'm very interested to see how, with the kind of change of structure in it, and I suppose it being very much mirroring the initial parts of the EUPATI course, for people that have done EUPATI already, and for Caroline and Circa who are going through it this year, should make it kind of invaluable for anyone who's starting off, because you'll have two people that are kind of generally starting off in the same way, or going through the same things.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think just coming from where you've come from, and also what parts you found most beneficial, I think that the role of the peer mentors, Mandy, Nuala, and indeed Serica, as a peer mentor, it might be worth explaining to people what that role actually entails, and just what that extra layer of support that's available for people, because obviously it's an 11-month program, so there'll be periods of hyperactivity and there'll be fallow periods. So maybe if you can give us your experience of being a peer mentor, and what that entailed.
Yeah, so I suppose, sorry. Yeah, 1 second there, just muted, sorry.
Go ahead there, Serica.
No, I was just going to say, I think I was the peer mentor just for one of the modules last time, for the regulatory affairs module. I think that people, so they had done the clinical trials module first, and then they came to the regulatory affairs, and I didn't have a huge amount of engagement with, because a lot of it is just a lot of reading. Do you know that kind of, like, it's very, very text heavy, and it's a lot of reading. And I would be talking, like, we had like a WhatsApp group, and I'd just be gently saying to people, just make sure you get your knowledge checks done and all that kind of stuff, and we're moving on to this there now. And like, I did ask them a lot, does anybody have any questions? And we had a few discussions in WhatsApp about different aspects of regulatory affairs. But I think because the clinical trial module is just so much in it, and like for people like Mark who are not come from a medical background, that when you finished that and you went to regulatory affairs, it wasn't this massive, oh my God, because you're already kind of a little bit understanding of stuff. You had a little bit of knowledge about clinical trials and how that fed into regulatory affairs. But I mean, I was always available if anybody had questions, or I think we had one lady who, for personal reasons, just removed herself from the course, and that's absolutely fine, and all you do, you try and just facilitate people, and if they have questions, always be there to answer questions. And I often found that the best way to learn something is to discuss it, to talk to other people about it, instead of just reading lines and lines and lines of text. That actually, if you talk something out, that it helps go in that kind of way. But it was very good, actually. I really enjoyed it. But like I say, because I was on that module, I feel like because they'd had the clinical trials, oh my God, the first module was that when they came to this module, they were like, oh, okay, I can relax now because that's done. And because it's completely different. It's completely different, and it's a lot of it's just regulations and EU law, all that kind of stuff. But people, if they had questions, I was absolutely happy to answer them. And it's the same, I'm sure it's the same with Mark, that when he was doing it, that if people had questions, as long as you know the answer, but then you feel like you would know the answer because you've done the course. You feel like, well, I have the knowledge, I've done that. So it's not a question of approaching this from, God, I haven't a clue. But that never happened because, even though I'm MS and sometimes the memory is not great, but I would always remember. And to be honest with you, if I didn't know something, I'd always say, look, I'm not sure, or can I come back to you? This didn't happen too often, but I think it was just to make yourself available. And the thing about it is, your peer mentors will be available if you have questions, and there's no such thing as a stupid question. The stupid aspect is not asking the question that you think you want to ask, but you think you shouldn't. Always ask the question, because it just clarifies your own knowledge and helps you get more out of the course to ask the questions, because that's what we're here for, basically. Go on ahead, Mark.
Yeah, no. So I suppose for our group, the peer mentors, Nuala and Mandy at the time, we would have had I suppose people that were at various stages of even doing the course, you know, the WhatsApp group was pinging around, and somebody might say, has everybody completed this module? I was very busy at work last week. One of the girls moved house while we were doing it. So I think there was the I suppose the support there to say, look, as you said, Derek, it's over 11 months. There will be you know, there's a catch-up week, there's a break over the summer. So, and everyone was given every opportunity that, you know, if there was any valid reason why you couldn't keep up to speed. But I just think it was great, as Circa said, somebody that's done it before. You know, they have probably encountered any question that you think of as, you know, they probably encountered it when they were going through the course. And the fact that, I suppose, it had been, you know, you would have had the face-to-face meetings and things like that. As I said, the first thing that we were always there a big test at the end. And even the I suppose as you said that as well, Circa, what I do agree that doing clinical trials, it obviously did make the second module, the regulatory, as dirty as that may have been, and bulky, because you'd previously done the clinical trials aspect. It did make it more accessible. And as I said, for me, not coming from a medical background, I said I do like to read, so that does that did kind of help me a little bit. But it's just to have someone at the end of the phone. I said WhatsApp is a great thing because it's not too invasive. If somebody gets a chance to pick up on it, then great. Or somebody will always come back to you and say, yeah, look, you know, this is where I was at with this, and this is where I'm at with that. Or has anybody encountered that? Or, you know, what did you get out of that? Or, you know, so it's just a great tool to have. And, you know, it's great to have a sounding board. I think, you know, for me, it's the, you know, the interpersonal connections that we've made through doing the course, and the wealth of knowledge that, you know, all the graduates have from all their different backgrounds. You know, there's always going to be somebody that can answer any question that you come up with.
Thank you both. There's a question, or there's a hand raised there. So Billy, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, thank you very much, folks, and thank you for the introductory session. It's a great idea to give us an idea of what is involved. I'm just wondering if the lads could maybe comment on about approximately, I know how long is a piece of string, but approximately sort of what the weekly study period is, like how many hours a week would you be, generally speaking, expected to put into it?
Will I go first, Mark, or do you want
Yeah,
to?
work away, Circa. Yeah.
Yeah, so I dedicated an evening a week, and that was it. I said, this is the evening I'm doing this, and that's it. But everybody learns in a different way. You might want to break, because it was the way it was like you had a week, like week one was you do, and you do your knowledge check at the end of it, you work through the modules. So I would usually, not always, but sometimes I would just say, do you know what? My daughter was a lot younger and not a big sassy teenager, and it was easier. But I would just go, well, she's gone to bed, I'm going to do this now. Or sometimes when she's at school, you know, and but it's not a huge time commitment. I didn't find it was, you know, when you absolutely, because you have a life outside of this. It's not like you're doing a degree, you know, you haven't committed your whole life, all of your time to this. But I find ways to slot it in around my real life to that kind of way. It's not a huge, I didn't find it an absolutely massive commitment, but a couple of hours maybe in a week, I'd say, if that. I don't know, Mark, you might be different now, because I think it was easier for me in a way because I had some medical knowledge.
Yeah, I would say probably a couple of hours a week. I think, as I said, everyone's different with regard to how they approach and how they learn. So I think for me, I probably would have kind of skimmed over, you know, when the module was put out, would have skimmed over things, probably gone through the knowledge check just to see what kind of general knowledge that I had about the subject, and then would have dedicated, say, an evening when my daughter would have gone to bed or something like that, or very much, I suppose, treating it like it was, you know, I'm blocking out this time. So for those, you know, 2 hours, I'm just, you know, hiding myself away in a room, because you do need to, I suppose, be able to give it your concentration. That's the other thing, you know, if you were trying to sit down as I'm trying to do here now, while there's somebody having a meeting behind me on the other laptop, and a dog and a cat walking around the place as well, trying to concentrate, you do need to be able to just give it your time so that you don't miss out on anything, and then it makes it more, I suppose, less daunting for you as well. I don't think that there's anybody needs to be worried or apprehensive about it. You know, it's not like going on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire or some sort of quiz or anything like that. You know, the tools are going to be there, and all the information is there, and pretty much the answers are in the questions that you're being asked. So it's really just how comfortable you are with reading, and over time, the more practiced you become, the quicker I found it. If there was you had little bursts where some clips that you were learning from were 8 minutes, some were kind of 14 minutes or whatever, different things, and then some, maybe you're reading a research paper or something. It depends on what the subject matter was. But once you kind of get in, I think once you get into the first module and kind of get into the nitty gritty of that, I think everything will come very easily to everyone.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. I hope that answers things, Billy. We have another question coming in from Fiona, and it's in the chat. And Fiona asks, do you think this course would be useful for carers who have to advocate for their child with a long-term illness?
Yes. Absolutely, yes. 100% yes.
Why?
Because it gives you the tools and the confidence and the ability to actually know how to advocate effectively. Because anyone can advocate, but it's about knowing how to do it in an effective manner. And doing the opposing, well, for me, as I can only speak from my own point of view, but I found that from my point of view, doing the opposing course meant I was just a better advocate, and I was able to kind of hone in on particular areas that I wanted to focus on and that kind of stuff. And having done the course made it easier to do that. So definitely, I would say it's worth doing.
Yeah, I'd say it certainly gives you the tools to advocate on somebody's behalf, and maybe kind of teaches you how to wear a couple of different hats where you might need to be, objective rather than subjectively affected by, I think we can all become, very passionately embroiled in kind of things that matter most to us. But I think, it gives you the tools to kind of approach it in, I suppose, a more clinical way than a personal aspect, to make sure that you get the help or the answers that you're seeking. And there's nothing more worthy than advocating on behalf of someone who can't, because look, it's, as I said, for myself and Circa, who love the sound of our own voices. We talk the hind legs off donkey. But there are other people that just aren't comfortable in that setting, and then there's other people who absolutely can't, and I would like to think that if I wasn't, if I hadn't come along this journey myself, and if it was one of my children, heaven forbid, that had been diagnosed rather than myself, that I would have been able to find someone or find something in it myself that I would have been able to advocate successfully on their behalf. Because, with the way things are in the Irish health system, we need as many people fighting our corner as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well said, Mark. Well said. Declan, you have your hand raised. Would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, hello everyone, and thank you for a really good presentation. I think you've sold the course to me anyway. Is there, just in terms of like how many people per organization, or how does that kind of side of it work? Do you have to be there at a specific time, or can you do all of the course at whatever time you wanted if you aren't able to make it to a specific time? Could you just maybe go into a bit of that as well? And then what's the relationship between this course and the European course? Should someone think of doing both? Is this a stepping stone to the other, or do they cover basically the same material? So thanks again for the presentation.
No problem. I can probably answer from an IPOSI perspective, and I might ask Caroline to support me here. But so first of all, the connection with the EUPATI course is very strong. And actually this speaks to some of the changes that Mark referred to earlier from maybe previous editions of the course. So whereas previous editions of the course, we went the first module was clinical trials, second one was around regulatory, and third one was around health technology assessment. We've actually, we still have the clinical trials to begin with this time, but due to our education partners' availability, we've moved forward the health technology assessment one, which is before the regulatory one. So, which is an interesting dynamic, because what Mark was talking about, or what Circa was referring to there, about the regulatory, which is quite dense in terms of the amount of material that it's a regulatory process. It's naturally like that. but the foundation of the course is module one, is the understanding clinical trials, because it's only when you maybe assimilate some of that knowledge first, are you able to apply it in the subsequent modules, and you'll recognize yourself getting more and more confident with the terminology. And indeed, in previous editions of the course, we found that when people had reached the third module, that they were really, really able to go really deep into the topic because of the kind of fundamentals had gone before it. So it'll be interesting this time, because certainly I think that the whole area of how the state assesses new technologies and reimburses things new is an area of real interest for an awful lot of patient advocates. So I think that the heavy stuff might come in the middle of the course this time, but we'll see. And then in terms of the mandatory aspects, I guess, of being available. So obviously it's predominantly e-learning. So the lessons are released on a weekly basis, or indeed on a regular basis for each module. And then between the modules, there's a little bit of kind of grace time as well. But that's to be confirmed and firmed up on our side. But we would kind of probably insist on that the face-to-face elements, in terms of there's a number of key points in each module that we feel that people just need to be available for, because the value associated with them is probably immeasurable. And there's 3 workshops that are planned as part of each module. 2 of them are virtual and 1 of them is face-to-face. And those are key kind of milestones in anybody's learning, so that no matter where they are on their own kind of learning path, if they're either playing catch up or if they're way ahead of schedule and they want to know more, those are the kind of key points in which everybody can come together, and that sharing can happen, particularly in the role of the peer mentors. But also, I think I would commend our education partners and their willingness to support learners in the process, because one of the objectives from an IPOSI perspective is very much that the staff and the professionals that are working in these agencies, that they actually get the opportunity to engage with patient advocates and people outside of their normal sphere of work, and they find it very valuable, and I think that the graduates find it very valuable. So those are the kind of key things that we would emphasize would be probably the mandatory aspects. I hope that answers your question, Declan. Caroline, did you wish to add anything there about the connection with UPATI, or?
Yeah, well, just as had been mentioned before, myself and Circa started the course actually in January. So I could just, first of all, reinforce that the kind of learning time that's involved, I split it up into 2-hour packets, but I'm actually trying to do the course in 9 weeks instead of 12, just for personal reasons. And that's the great freedom that the e-learning has. Just, you know, it'll be very clear to you that when the modules are running, for example, module 1 for you guys is April, May, and June. And then how you break up your learning over that period, you know, will fit around your day-to-day life. It's very well known when the face-to-face is for module 1. It's the 28th of March. So again, that's the in-person one. The other 2 are virtual. So, you know, if you could at least make yourself available just to join us online, especially one of those is the good clinical practice workshop, which is like, I even have past students wanting to join that again. It's such a great 2.5-hour workshop. And then I can tell you now, I already have the tentative dates for the workshops in September, which will be the next time that there will be, again, 1 face-to-face and 2 virtual. So you'll know very far in advance. And just maybe to emphasize what Derek was saying, you know, what a great opportunity to meet the HPRA, maybe even in their premises. And Mark will remember, they had like 5-6 speakers on their agenda. So you don't just meet one person from the HPRA, you meet, you know, the director and the head of the department, and then the people who are on the ground working in it. And the same with the NCP, they had agendas with 4 and 5 people speaking. So you can't underestimate the opportunity of being in the same room with them, you know, not just listening to them, but then during the coffee breaks and so on. Yeah, so that's kind of my additional information, Derek.
Thanks, Caroline, and thanks for the question, Declan. The bit that I've kind of taken from over the years of coordinating the effort around the program has been that traditionally, I think either within patient groups or within certain disease areas, the focus is very much on kind of patient to patient learning and that kind of peer learning. But I think the work of IPOSI, because we have patients driving the organization and driving the agenda, it's actually the rooms that you come into where it's patients plus other stakeholders like the state agencies, like the research community, like the healthcare industry, that the learning from those kinds of rooms it doubles, triples, because actually when you're listening to other perspectives that either complement the patient perspective or maybe don't complement the patient perspective, I think that's where I've certainly learned, that's where an awful lot of the confidence comes from, because I think maybe certainly maybe going back 10 years in patient involvement, an awful lot of the criticisms that maybe would come to me or the people in the office was that when patients were actually part of committees, or that they weren't actually saying that much. And that was the experience of the other stakeholders who were maybe expecting this all singing, all dancing, all representative patient to be on top of everything and calling the truth out all the time. But I find that the confidence to be, I think, as Sorcha and Mark were saying, a better advocate, I think that comes from those rooms where you get to listen to other perspectives, but you get more confident in your own ability to actually put your hand up and say, actually, I have a question, and it's not the stupid question, it's my question. And I find that has definitely come from increasingly from the graduates of the program. And I would probably, if there was a key message I would say to anybody even thinking about applying for the course, is if you do successfully get onto the course, to persevere, that the graduation at the end and the ability to kind of call yourself an IPOSI graduate, that there's a huge sense of I would probably call it togetherness from this community of graduates or alumni that comes with having completed the course. And no matter where you are during the 11-month period of learning, that there is a significant value of achieving the completion of the course. And that's where an awful lot of the subsequent work comes from, in terms of joining things like as Sorcha said, the UPATI National Platform in Ireland, where we advertise further opportunities. The patient capacity building program that IPOSI has, that Caroline manages, where we work on things like communication skills and social media skills, those kinds of additional skills that again make you a better advocate. So it's kind of, that's where the full package emerges from our work. So I hope that gives people a sense of the program. So it's 12:53. I don't see any, unless I've missed a question.
Derek, if I could just answer a question about the workshops. So there are 3 in-person workshops, and as much as possible, we try and allow people to get there and back during the day. So it's usually about a 2.5-hour schedule, with breaks. So for example, it might start at 11 and end late lunch, or it might, have an hour before lunch, then have a networking lunch, and then 2 hours afterwards. But we try as much as possible that people can get there and back. For the virtual ones, to date, they have all been from 9:30, 10 o'clock until lunchtime. It could be that an educational partner would have to do it from lunchtime in the afternoon, but the preference from the students that we've surveyed is that they're due on work days during work hours for the majority. And any of the optional kind of networking, we've done some networking Zooms with peer mentors, or for example, there are some practical webinars in module 3 for the HTA, and we offer those both during the day and in the evening. You could join whichever suited you. So we really try and accommodate, but for the workshops, yeah, they would be Monday to Friday during work hours. Thank you.
Thanks, Caroline, for that. So there is a question from Dimna, and Dimna's question is it relevant to an employee of a patient organisation who needs to advocate and facilitate research for their community? And the answer is absolutely. So on average, we have about maybe a 50-50 split in terms of employees of patient groups. And iPOSI would have over 100 patient groups. We're probably the largest network of patient groups in the country, but we also have individual advocates as members as well. So it's that combination actually and brings a dynamic that I think is of value to both employees of patient organizations and individual, maybe unaffiliated advocates, because that kind of cross-learning between groups and individuals is just hugely valuable. So I hope that answers your question, Dimna. Question from Caroline in relation to the workshop, Caroline OD. So just in relation to the workshops, I have hospital appointments on the day. Is the in-person workshop in the morning or afternoon? So Caroline, I think you've answered that.
Yeah, so that's booked. It's in the Carmichael on the 28th of March. It will start at either 11 a.m. or 12, just to allow people to arrive. It'll have a networking lunch, and then we'll have a session after lunch. So the idea again is start very late in the morning, finish early enough in the afternoon, and we'll have a program of about 2.5 hours with a lunch. So that's the schedule for the 28th.
Sorry, just don't make any noise coming in. It's all very quiet, right? No, it's all right. Go on. I am, but it's over. And I'm on mute.
Well, Billy, believe me, as trust me, the WhatsApp groups and the in-person workshops and the face-to-face will be anything but quiet. Trust me. So, question from.
Sorry, I was shouting at my wife there. Apologies.
I was saving your blushes there. A question from Alan. I'm not employed by a patient organisation, so how many half days in total do I need to ask my employer to do the course, normal working hours? Caroline, is that something you might have?
Yeah, I answered that there in the chat. So it is 9 half days that are during work days and work hours. Yeah, half days being at 2.5 hours. You know, it's not longer than that. So we'll start usually at 9:30 or 10 o'clock and finish by 12:30, 1 o'clock.
Okay, I hope that answers your question, Alan. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, all city centre locations. And the first one is in the Carmichael. And we'll send out information with respect to car parking, or, you know, how to get there and stuff for people who wouldn't be familiar with traveling around the city. For anyone who absolutely cannot get there and back, for example, let's say you're traveling from, you know, Cork or Donegal or whatever, then we'll try and make arrangements for one night accommodation. But for most people, we'll try and get you there and back in the same day.
Okay, and just to clarify that's Carmichael House in Smithfield in Dublin city centre that Caroline's referring to. Okay, so I thought we were going to give people some minutes back from their lunch, but it turns out that we used up almost the full hour. So thanks everybody for your questions. Thanks to Circa, Mark and Caroline for their help in facilitating this. And yes, I hope everybody who has managed to join us today, but also who maybe reviews the recording online, will consider applying. So thanks everybody, and have a good rest of your day.